Hello and welcome. Tonight we have a story for you. A long, unhurried story that will carry us through time. It is a story about a simple human idea, perhaps one of the simplest ideas of all, the joy of kicking a ball. This is the full, quiet story of football, the complete, gentle history of the beautiful game. Our story begins in the dust of the ancient world. Before there were stadiums, before there were teams, before there was even a name for it, the idea was already there. We must go back in time over 2,000 years to the Han Dynasty in ancient China, a time of great power and order where soldiers practiced a game upon the hard-packed earth. They called it Kyuju. It literally means kick ball. This was not a game for mere amusement. It was part of military training. It kept the soldiers fit, taught them balance, agility, and discipline. The ball they used was not like the ones we know. It was made of leather, carefully stitched together, and stuffed with feathers and animal hair. Light yet tough, it was built for precision. The goal was often a small hole, cut into a silk cloth stretched between two tall bamboo poles, high above the ground. It took incredible skill to kick that light ball through such a small opening. Imagine the scene, the quiet focus of the soldiers, the sun beating down on the training ground, the soft thud of leather as the ball was passed, controlled, and finally shot toward the high net. This was a refined, skillful game, our first clear echo, the first whisper of football. But this idea was not confined to China. It was as if the game itself, the instinct to move a ball toward a goal, was waiting to be discovered all over the world. Let us travel west to the sun-baked fields of ancient Greece. Here they played a game called a piskairos. It was rough, physical, and full of energy. Two teams lined up with a line drawn in the dirt between them. The ball, often made of linen scraps or a pig's bladder, was thrown, kicked, and carried in a fierce attempt to push the other team back over their own line. They used their hands. They used their feet. It was a known, tough sport, but at its core, the same human impulse was there. The Romans adopted it, as they did with so many things, and made it their own. They called it harpastum. It was even tougher, even more brutal. Using a smaller, harder ball, it became a contest of pure strength. Roman legions played it to stay fit and to sharpen their aggression, training for war. Imagine a mass of bodies, soldiers colliding in a dusty Roman square, the air filled with shouts and grunts as they pushed and shoved to carry that small ball to the enemy's end line. It was closer to a battle than a game. And then our journey crosses the great ocean to Mesoamerica. Here, the ancient Olmec, Mayan, and Aztec civilizations played a game that was far more than a sport. It was sacred, a ritual tied to the gods and to the stars. They built magnificent stone courts, massive eye-shaped arenas with towering sloped walls on either side. The ball was made from solid, heavy rubber, drawn from local trees. It could weigh several kilograms, and the rules were astonishing. Players could not use their hands or feet. They could only strike the heavy, bouncing ball with their hips, thighs, and elbows. The goal was a stone hoop set vertically into the high wall. Imagine the difficulty, sending that heavy ball through a small ring, using only your hip. The sharp thwack of rubber echoed off the stone as crowds watched in awe. But this was not just a game. It was a reenactment of cosmic battles between gods of light and darkness. The stakes were immense. Legend says that the losers, and sometimes even the winners, were offered as sacrifices to the gods. This was a matter of life and death. As these great empires faded, their sacred games fractured and returned to the people. And in medieval Europe, especially in England, this ancient idea took a wild, chaotic form. They called it mob football. The name was perfect. This was not played on a field, but across entire countrysides. It often erupted on holidays like Shrove Tuesday, a day of feasting and chaos before the calm of Lent. The teams were whole villages pitted against one another. Sometimes hundreds, even thousands, took part. The ball was often an inflated pig's bladder. The goals were miles apart. One village might aim for their church door, the other for the town mill. And the rules? There were none. It was a moving riot. A wave of people surged through muddy fields, splashing through rivers, and crashing through narrow village streets. They kicked, shoved, and dragged the ball toward their goal, breaking fences, windows, and anything in their path. It was pure, raw, chaotic energy. Kings and rulers despised it. They called it dangerous, a public nuisance. King Edward II banned it in 1314, citing the great noise in the city and the many evils it brought. It also kept young men from archery, the essential military skill of the realm. But it didn't matter. It was banned again and again, yet it never died. The simple, raw joy of the game survived. This wild, untamed energy, it was the heart of football itself, waiting patiently for someone to give it shape. For hundreds of years, that is what football was, 100 different games, all wild, all with different rules. The chaos had to be tamed. Our story now moves forward in time, to the 19th century, to England, the age of the Industrial Revolution, a time of machines, factories, and a new desire for order. The game was being played in the great public schools, places with names like Eton, Harrow, and Rugby. Here the sons of the wealthy were educated, and the schools used the game to build character, to turn rowdy boys into disciplined gentlemen. But each school played differently. Everyone had its own private, sacred set of rules. At Eton they played the wall game, a strange, slow contest, fought against a long brick wall. At Harrow they played a rougher, grander game they called Giants. And then there was Rugby School. A legend was born there in the year 1823. A young student named William Webb Ellis was playing football. The rules allowed him to catch the ball, but he was supposed to kick it back. The story goes that in a moment of inspiration, or perhaps frustration, he caught the ball, and instead of kicking it, he ran. He ran forward, holding the ball in his arms, toward the other team's goal. The plaque at the school still says he did it, with a fine disregard for the rules of football as played in his time. We may never know if the story is true, but the legend itself is what matters. It created the great split, the fundamental question: do you play with your hands or only with your feet? When students from these schools went on to universities like Cambridge, they wanted to play, but chaos followed. One man would try to kick the ball, another would catch it and run, and a third would aim for his opponent's shins. They couldn't agree on anything. In 1848, a group of students at Cambridge tried to fix it. They wrote the Cambridge Rules, the first major attempt to unify the game. Their rules were clear. It was a kicking game. No running with the ball. No hacking. It was a good start, but it wasn't official. The time had come for a final decision. Our story now moves to a specific room, on a specific day, October 26, 1863. A group of men from a dozen clubs and schools gathered in a London tavern called the Freemasons' Tavern. Picture them sitting around a wooden table in the dim gaslight, in their suits, with serious faces. The man who called the meeting was Ebenezer Cobb Morley, the father of the Football Association. Their goal was simple: to write one final set of rules everyone could agree on. They argued for weeks, meeting 6 times, and the entire debate came down to one thing: violence. Specifically 2 rules: running with the ball in your hands, and hacking, the act of deliberately kicking your opponent in the shins. Francis Campbell, from the Blackheath Club argued passionately. "If you take out hacking," he said, "you are ruining the game. You are taking away all the courage." But the others, led by Morley, disagreed. They wanted a new kind of game, one built on skill and art, not brute force. The argument became too heated. Campbell stood up, announced that Blackheath and the clubs that supported the rougher style could not be part of this, and walked out. That was the great split. In that moment, two sports were truly born. The clubs that left would later form the Rugby Football Union. The men who stayed created something new, the Football Association. And from the word association, the nickname soccer was born. University slang, assos, became soccer. Their new rules, the laws of the game, were simple and clear. 13 laws in total. No running with the ball in your hands, and absolutely no hacking. The game would be won with the feet, a game of dribbling, passing, and skill. The modern game of football was born, but rules alone were not enough. You needed a prize. You needed a dream. In 1871, a man named Charles Alcock had an idea, a Challenge Cup, open to all. The Football Association Challenge Cup was born, the FA Cup, the oldest football competition in the world. It was a knockout tournament where any team from any town could enter. A small, unknown side could dream of defeating a giant. The magic of the cup captured hearts everywhere. But success brought a new problem, money. The game was exploding in popularity. Thousands paid to watch, especially in the industrial towns of northern England. Clubs wanted the best players, and they began paying them secretly. This caused outrage. The game was meant to be for gentlemen, amateurs from the wealthy South who played for love, not profit. But the working-class players from the North were the best, and they couldn't afford to play for free. The FA threatened to ban the professional clubs. The northern clubs threatened to form their own association. Faced with crisis, the FA relented. In 1885, after fierce debate, professionalism was made legal. A player could now be paid to play, and that changed everything. Paid players needed regular matches, not just friendlies or the FA Cup. A Scottish shopkeeper and Aston Villa director named William McGregor had a brilliant idea. In 1888, he wrote to other top clubs, suggesting a championship, a league where every team played every other team twice, once at home and once away, and the team with the most points at the end of the season would be champion. It was the birth of league football, the first in the world. Now, all the pieces were in place. The game was no longer a pastime. It was a profession, a weekly spectacle, a passion for the working-class people who filled the new stadiums. The game was born. It was organized. It had rules, stars, and structure. And now it was ready to conquer the world. The game did not stay in England for long. In the late 1800s, the British Empire stretched across the globe. The sun, it was said, never set on it. British sailors, merchants, engineers, and railway workers traveled everywhere, and in their luggage they brought a football and a rule book. Imagine the scene on the docks of Buenos Aires in Argentina, or in the port of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. British sailors on a break from their ships kicked a ball around. The locals stopped and watched, fascinated by this strange new game. Soon they asked to join in. In 1894, a man named Charles Miller, a Brazilian of Scottish descent, returned to São Paulo from school in England. He brought with him 2 footballs and a copy of the FA rules. He is known as the father of Brazilian football. In Argentina, a Scottish schoolteacher named Alexander Watson Hutton is called the father of Argentine football. In Italy, British textile workers in the port of Genoa formed a club. That is why one of Italy's oldest teams is called the Genoa Cricket and Football Club. The game spread like wildfire. It was a seed planted in fertile soil, and it grew everywhere. But a funny thing happened. When the game was planted in new soil, it grew into a different-shaped tree. It took on the spirit of the people who played it. Nowhere was this more true than in South America. In England, the game was about strength, kick and rush, long balls, and physical challenges. But in South America, it became something else. In Argentina and Uruguay, the game was learned in the potreros, the empty, dusty, uneven patches of land in poor neighborhoods. On this rough ground, you couldn't play a long ball game. You had to be clever. You had to be tricky. You had to keep the ball close to your feet. This created a new kind of player, the pibe, the kid, small, agile, and full of tricks. In Brazil, the game mixed with the rhythm of the culture. It mixed with the music of the samba with the dance-like movements of capoeira. They developed a style of philosophy they called jogo bonito. It means the beautiful game. For them, it was not just about winning. It was about how you won. It was about expression, about dribbling, about joy, about art. It was a fluid, dancing style the rest of the world had never seen. The game was spreading, and it was changing. Soon, nations wanted to play against each other, to see who was best. The game was now international. It needed international rules. In 1904, a group of men from France, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland met in Paris. The man who led the meeting was a French journalist named Robert Garin. They saw the game's unstoppable rise and knew it needed a global body to guide it. They formed the Fédération Internationale de Football Association. We know it as FIFA. Notably, England, the home of the game, did not join. They felt they were above a global body. They would join years later. FIFA's biggest, most ambitious dream was to one day host a world tournament, a true World Cup, to find the one undisputed champion of the world. It would take years. The First World War put a stop to everything. The world was torn apart. But after the war, the dream returned. The man who made it happen was Jules Rimet, a Frenchman, the third president of FIFA. He was a visionary. He had served in the war and had seen its horrors. He believed that this simple game could help to heal the world. He believed it could bring nations together in peace. He saw his proof at the 1924 and 1928 Olympic Games. The football tournament was a huge success, and it was dominated by a brilliant, tiny team from South America, Uruguay. They came to Paris in 1924 and enchanted everyone with their skillful passing game. They won the gold medal and won it again in 1928. This proved to Rimet that a world tournament would work. Finally, in 1930, the first ever FIFA World Cup was held. It was given to the small country of Uruguay. Why them? Because they were the Olympic champions. Because it was the 100th anniversary of their independence. And because they made an incredible promise. They offered to pay for the travel and hotels of every single team that came. Even so, it was a very different World Cup from the one we know. Many European teams did not want to go. The journey by boat across the Atlantic took 3 weeks. Only 4 European teams made the trip. The French, Belgian, and Romanian teams all traveled together on one ship, the Comte Verde. They trained on the deck of the ship as it sailed. But it happened. 13 nations came together to play for a golden trophy, a trophy designed by Abel Lafleur, which would later be named the Jules Rimet Trophy. And in the final match in their brand new stadium, in front of 93,000 roaring fans, the host nation, Uruguay, a tiny country with a golden generation of players, beat their rivals, Argentina, and became the first ever champions of the world. Jules Rimet's dream had come true. The World Cup was born. It was held again in 1934 in Italy. This tournament was different. It was dark. It was hosted by the dictator Mussolini, who used it as a massive tool for political propaganda. The Italian team, under immense pressure, won the final. Then, in 1938, the World Cup was in France. It was played under the growing shadow of impending war. Austria, which had a brilliant team, had been annexed by Nazi Germany. Their best players were forced to play for the German team. It was a tense, unhappy tournament. And then, as the 1930s came to an end, a dark, terrible shadow fell across the world, the Second World War. For 12 long years the stadiums fell silent. The World Cup was not played. The golden trophy, the symbol of Rimet's dream, was in danger. An Italian FIFA vice president named Ottorino Barassi knew the occupying Nazi forces in Rome would want to steal it. So he secretly, bravely, took the trophy from a bank vault. He smuggled it home, and for the entire duration of the war, he hid the Jules Rimet trophy in a simple shoebox under his bed. This small, brave act kept the dream alive. When the war finally ended, a shattered, grieving world needed something to believe in. It needed to play again. In 1950, the World Cup returned, and it was held in the one nation that seemed to live and breathe the beautiful game, Brazil. The war had devastated Europe, but Brazil was ready. They had built the biggest stadium in the world for this tournament, the Maracanã, a vast concrete bowl in Rio de Janeiro, a stadium that could hold 200,000 people, an audience of a size almost unimaginable. The whole country was not just hopeful. They were certain. This was their year. Their team was brilliant. They were the hosts. They were scoring goals for fun. They danced on the field. They played Joga Bonito. The tournament had a strange format, not a single knockout final, but a final group stage. Still, it came down to one last match. Brazil against their small neighbor, Uruguay, the team that had won the very first World Cup. Brazil only needed a draw, a tie in front of their 200,000 fans, and the trophy would be theirs. In that stadium, 200,000 Brazilians gathered for the celebration. It was a carnival. They were already singing. They were already champions. The newspapers that morning had already printed, "Champions of the world." Brazil scored the first goal, and the stadium exploded. The party began. It seemed inevitable. But then Uruguay scored. The stadium grew a little quiet, anxious, but a draw was still enough. And then, with just minutes to go, a Uruguayan player named Alcides Gigia dribbled down the wing. He shot the ball, and it went in. The stadium, all 200,000 people, fell silent. A silence so deep, so profound, so full of shock and grief, it was given a name, the Maracanazo, the agony of Maracanã. Brazil had lost. The nation went into mourning. It was not just a lost game, it was a national tragedy. People were truly devastated. Far away, in a small town in Brazil, a 9-year-old boy heard the game on the radio. He saw his father, a football player himself, crying with an adult grief the boy could not fully understand. The boy, named Edson Arantes do Nascimento, only knew he wanted to make it better. He put his arm around his father and made a promise. "Don't worry. One day I will win the World Cup for you." The world would come to know that little boy by his nickname, Pelé. 8 years later, the World Cup was in Sweden, and that boy, now 17, was on the team. He was young, unknown, and brilliant. He almost didn't make the team. He was injured, but his teammates insisted. They knew he was special. He took the world by storm. He scored the winning goal in the quarterfinal. He scored 3 goals, a hat trick in the semifinal. And in the final match against the host nation Sweden, he scored 2 of the most beautiful goals the world had ever seen. One of them, he controlled the ball on his chest in the penalty box, looped it delicately over a defender's head, and before it hit the ground, smashed it into the net. It was a moment of pure, breathtaking genius. Brazil, the country that was in tears, was now champion of the world. Their 17-year-old hero was crying tears of joy on his teammate's shoulder. Pelé was not just a player. He was a phenomenon. He was the complete athlete, fast, strong, and graceful. He could shoot powerfully with his left foot, his right foot, and he could jump and head the ball like a champion. He could dribble with an elegance that was mesmerizing, the perfect combination of power and grace. Brazil, with Pelé, had shown the world how jogo bonito, the beautiful game, was meant to be played. They won the World Cup again in 1962. Although Pelé was injured early in the tournament, his teammate Garrincha, a player with bent legs who dribbled with the joy of a child, took over and led them to victory. And then, in 1970, in Mexico, this was the first World Cup broadcast in color. The world got to see, in bright, vivid yellow and green, what many still believe was the greatest football team in history. This Brazil team was a symphony. It had 5 great number 10 players all playing together. Pelé, now at the peak of his powers, was the conductor. They played with joy, freedom, and magic that was simply unstoppable. They won every single game. In the final, they beat a strong Italy team, 4-1. The final goal is still called one of the greatest ever. A long, patient team move, where almost every player touched the ball. A slow, beautiful build-up before Pelé received the ball near the goal. He didn't even look. He just gently rolled it into the path of his captain, Carlos Alberto, who came running and smashed it into the net. It was perfection. Brazil had won the World Cup for the 3rd time. They were given the Jules Rimet Trophy to keep forever. And Pelé, the boy who made a promise, was now au rey the king. He was the first truly global superstar of the game. He had won 3 World Cups. He had scored over 1,000 goals. He was, and for many still is, the greatest of all time. Pelé's era proved that football could be art, but as his time at the top was ending, a new way of thinking about the game, a new revolution, was beginning in Europe. As we move into the 1970s, our story takes us to the Netherlands, Holland, a small, flat country, famous for its canals and its artists. Here, a new idea was being born, a new philosophy. It emerged from Ajax of Amsterdam, and it was called total football. The idea was revolutionary, but like all great ideas, it was also simple. In a traditional team, every player had a job. A defender defended, an attacker attacked. You stayed in your position. Total football threw that idea away. In this system, any player could play anywhere. A defender could surge forward to become an attacker. A midfielder could drop back to defend. The players would flow, switch, and interchange constantly. It was a fluid, dizzying, beautiful system, a kaleidoscope of orange shirts. It was almost impossible to defend against. It required every player to be incredibly skillful and intelligent. They had to understand one thing above all: space. And the man who orchestrated it all, the general on the field, was the brilliant Johan Cruyff. Cruyff was thin and elegant. He didn't look like an athlete. He looked like a professor or an artist. He played with his mind. He saw the game 3 moves ahead, like a chess grandmaster. His famous move, the Cruyff turn, was a sudden, deceptive, beautiful pivot, simple, intelligent, and deadly. He was the perfect conductor for this new football orchestra. His team, the Netherlands, in their bright, iconic orange shirts, arrived at the 1974 World Cup in West Germany. They dazzled the world. They played football so advanced it looked like it came from the future. They swept aside Argentina. They defeated Brazil, and they reached the final against the hosts, West Germany. The Germans were powerful, organized, and efficient. The final began with a moment of pure total football. The Netherlands kicked off. One pass, then another, and another. The Germans couldn't get near it. 13 passes later, the ball came to Cruyff. He dribbled into the box and was fouled. A penalty in the very first minute. Before a single German player had touched the ball, the Netherlands scored. They were winning 1-0. It seemed unstoppable. But in the end, it wasn't. The Germans did not panic. They fought back. And they won 2-1. The creators of total football did not win the trophy, but they won the hearts of the world. Johan Cruyff and his team changed how football was played and how it was thought about forever. His ideas would inspire generations of coaches and players to come. While Cruyff was the great thinker, the next legend of the game was something else entirely. He was not a system. He was a force of nature. His name was Diego Armando Maradona. He came from the villa, the shanty towns of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Short, powerful, with a low center of gravity, he grew up in poverty. He played with fire, passion, and rebellion. The ball seemed glued to his left foot. He could dribble through entire teams, defying physics. He was a flawed genius, a rebel who fought the system, embraced his roots, and became the people's champion. His entire story, his genius and his darkness, can be told in just one match, the 1986 World Cup quarter-final, Argentina versus England. This was more than a game. Just 4 years earlier, the two nations had been at war. The tension was immense. The hatred, real, and Maradona delivered. Two of the most famous and most different goals in history. The first came when the ball was looped high toward the English goalkeeper, Peter Shilton. As they both jumped, Maradona used not his head, but his fist to punch the ball into the net. The referee didn't see it. The goal stood. The English were furious. It was a clear act of cheating. After the game, Maradona smiled and said it was scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. It was clever, outrageous, pure Maradona. But just 4 minutes later, he showed the other side of his genius. He received the ball inside his own half, 60 yards from goal, and began to run. He dribbled past one English player, then another, then a third, a fourth, a fifth. He rounded the goalkeeper and slotted the ball into the net. It became known as the goal of the century. It wasn't just a goal. It was a miracle. A work of art. In 4 minutes he showed both the devil and the God inside him. Maradona, almost by himself, dragged Argentina to win that World Cup. He was a king like Pelé, but a different kind of king. He was the king of the streets. As Maradona's era was coming to an end, the world of football was changing again. This time the change was about money. Television was becoming a global giant. Satellite TV meant games could be broadcast live all over the world. In 1992, the top clubs in England made a historic decision. They broke away from the old football league, the one William McGregor had founded, to form the new Premier League. They signed huge, massive television deals. Suddenly, money flooded into the game. That very same year, in Europe, the old European Cup, a tournament for the best club teams, was rebranded. It was given a new name, a new logo, and a new famous anthem. It became the Champions League, designed to be a global television event. Football was no longer just a sport. It was a product. It was entertainment. It was a multi-billion-dollar global industry. The game on the field changed, too. It became faster, more athletic. The players became stronger, fitter. They were supreme athletes, trained by scientists and nutritionists. And they were global celebrities. Their faces appeared on billboards in every country. The superstar of this new, glossy, modern era was a Frenchman of Algerian descent, Zinedine Zidane. Zizou, as he was known, was a walking work of art. He was tall, over 6 feet, yet he played with the delicate grace of a ballet dancer. But he also had the toughness of a street fighter, shaped by his difficult neighborhood in Marseille. He played as if he had all the time in the world. When the ball came to him in the middle of a chaotic, fast-paced game, everything seemed to slow down. His control, his first touch, was perfect. He could glide past players as if they were not there. He was pure elegance. In 1998, the World Cup was held in his home country, France. The nation was a mix of many cultures, and the team reflected this. It was called the Black Blank Burr Team, black, white, and Arab. Zidane, the son of Algerian immigrants, was their leader. The nation was desperate to win for the first time. In the final, against the mighty Brazil, the defending champions, Zidane became the hero of all of France. He rose up and scored 2 goals with his head, 2 powerful headers from corners. France were champions of the world. Zidane was the best player on the planet. He was joined by other icons of this new, globalized game. There was Ronaldo, the first Ronaldo from Brazil, Il Fenomeno, the phenomenon. He was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. He had the speed of an Olympic sprinter, combined with the dribbling skill of Maradona. He was terrifying. He would run straight at defenders and simply explode past them. Before the 1998 final that Zidane won, Ronaldo was the biggest star. But on the day of the final, he mysteriously fell ill. He had a convulsion just hours before the game. He was a shadow of himself on the field. It is a mystery to this day. His story was one of heartbreak, but it became a story of redemption. He suffered 2 terrible knee injuries. Doctors said he would never play again, but he fought back. 4 years later, in 2002, at the World Cup in Japan and South Korea, Ronaldo came back. He led Brazil to win their 5th World Cup and was the top scorer. He had found his happy ending. The game was now bigger than it had ever been. The money was bigger. The stadiums were bigger. The stars were bigger. The stage was set. But no one could have predicted what was about to happen next. No one could have imagined the era of the two. For more than a decade, the entire story of football was defined by 2 men. They were a perfect, impossible rivalry. They were completely different. On one side, Cristiano Ronaldo from Portugal. He was the perfect athlete, tall, strong, fast. He seemed to be sculpted from marble. He crafted his body through unbelievable, relentless hard work and dedication. He was famous for his training, his diet, his absolute focus. He could jump higher than anyone. He could strike the ball with ferocious, swerving power. He was a machine built to score goals. He was pure power, will, and ambition. On the other side, Lionel Messi from Argentina. He was the opposite. He was small, quiet. He was a natural-born genius. When he was a boy, he was so small, he had to take special medicine, growth hormones, to help him grow. But on the field, he was a giant. He played as if the ball was not a separate object, but was just a part of his foot. He would dribble through entire teams in tiny, impossible spaces. It was not power. It was magic. It was art. They played for the 2 biggest rival clubs in the world. Ronaldo for Real Madrid, Messi for Barcelona. For 15 years they battled. If Messi scored 3 goals, Ronaldo would score 3 goals the next day. If Ronaldo won the award for the best player in the world, Messi would win it the next year. They broke every single record, records that people thought would never be broken. They pushed each other to heights the sport had never seen. The debate was endless. It dominated the sport. In every cafe, in every home, in every country, people asked, who is better? The machine or the magician, the worker or the artist? It was an era of gods. While they battled, the game continued to evolve. A new style, called tiki-taka, was born. It was the child of Johan Cruyff's total football. It was perfected at Messi's club, Barcelona, a style based on endless, perfect, short passing. They would hypnotize the other team. A Spanish team, led by this generation of players, used it to win the 2010 World Cup. The powerful, efficient German team won in 2014, and a new force was rising. A force that had been ignored for far too long, the women's game. For decades, women's football had been ignored. In England, the FA had actually banned women from playing for 50 years. But now, it was exploding. The Women's World Cup became a massive event. Players like Marta from Brazil, a genius who played with the same magic as Pelé, players like Mia Hamm and Megan Rapinoe from the United States became global icons and champions for social change off the field. The game was finally, truly, becoming a game for everyone. But one story was still not finished. Lionel Messi, the little Argentine genius, had won everything, every trophy, every award, for his club, Barcelona. But he had never won the World Cup for his country, Argentina. It was the one shadow on his career, the one thing his great hero, Maradona, had done that he had not. He tried again and again. He lost in the final in 2014 to Germany. He thought about retiring. He was heartbroken. But he came back for one last chance, the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. He was 35 years old. He was slower. He could not run like he used to, but he was smarter. He played with the passion of his entire nation on his shoulders. He led, he scored, he assisted. He carried his team to the final. In the final, against a brilliant French team led by the new superstar Kylian Mbappé, he played in what many believe is the greatest football match ever played. It was a drama beyond belief. Argentina were winning. Then France came back. Back and forth. Goals and more goals. It ended in a penalty shootout, the most stressful way to end a game. And Messi finally lifted the golden trophy. The little boy from Rosario, who was once too small, was now a champion of the world. The story for him was complete. And so, our journey comes to a close. We have traveled so far, from a dusty field in ancient China to a chaotic wild mob in a medieval English town. We stood in that quiet, gas-lit tavern in London as the rules were written. We watched as the game crossed the oceans and learned to dance in the potreros of South America. We saw the national tragedy of Brazil and the promise of a 9-year-old boy named Pelé. We saw the beautiful, flowing genius of Cruyff's total football. We watched in awe at the 2 goals of Maradona, the hand of God and the feet of a god. We saw the quiet, impossible elegance of Zidane. And we lived through the impossible era of the 2, Ronaldo and Messi. The game is now a global language. It is spoken in every country, on every continent. It can stop wars. It can start them. It can create heroes. It can break hearts. It is a multi-billion-dollar global industry. And yet, at its heart, it is still just that same simple, ancient idea, the simple human joy of kicking a ball. The story of football never truly ends. New heroes will be born. New legends will be made. New chapters are being written even now. But our story for tonight is complete. Now there is nothing left to do, nothing to think about. Just let your mind drift, let the story fade, and just rest. Good night.